are now listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
IELTS Speaking sample answers for recent cue cards sent in to us by students who've taken the exam and also by questions we found around online, the interwebs as they're sometimes called. Right, let's jump straight into it. This is the format we're going to look at cue cards today. I'll say the cue card, then I'll give you a sample answer, and I'll pick out some elements afterwards that I think would be valuable for you as a student so that you can incorporate them into your next cue card practice session or exam. My name's Ben Worthington. I'm from the UK. I've been teaching IELTS. I've been specialised in IELTS for well over 10 years now. We were the first company to do IELTS podcasts. We have one of the leading websites online, IELTSPodcast.com, and there you can find a ton of resources, including our new Pass Fast course, Pass the IELTS Fast course, where you get some great instruction, some great material to help you pass the exam faster. And the whole premise of that newsletter or of that new guide is to use tools rather than information. So when you go to IELTSPodcast.com, you can sign up there and you'll get a series of emails which all go to tutorials which tell you and give you advice on how you can pass the exam fast. And as I said, one of the cruxes, one of the main points in these tutorials is the use of tools rather than information. Now, we can class tools as such as the AI essay checker, where you can just submit essay after essay after essay so you can improve faster, you can spot your errors, you can just work all weekend. You don't have to wait for the tutor to give you your feedback. It's really valuable if you are in a pickle and need to pass fast. Another type of tool are the frameworks. We're going to use a few frameworks in our answers today for these cue cards, but also in the course we give you a free basic framework to use for your essay writing, and then when you upgrade to the AI essay checker, you also get an offer, a ridiculously good offer, to get all our courses: Speaking Confidence, Sentence Guide, Reading Course, Academic Task 1, all of them, and you can save like $300 US, and we're running that through May. Let's jump into it. Cue card 1. Describe a historical period you would like to know more about. You should say when it was, what you're interested in, what you have known, and why you would like to know more. Let's jump into it. I'd like to tell you about the Vikings period, or specifically when the Vikings invaded the United Kingdom, or Britannia, or whatever it used to be called. I think this was after the Roman times. I think it was. I'm not entirely sure. I'm interested in what they brought to the country from a linguistic background. I'm interested in how the impact they had on the English language, because being from the north, there are a lot of similarities, because as far as I know, the Vikings invaded the north of England quite intensely, and when I went to Norway, I saw and I heard some similarities with English. For example, in Norway they call a kid Burn, and this is a colloquial expression for a kid. In Newcastle they also call them Burns, and in Scotland as well, I think. So I would be interested in how they spoke. And what I've known about these people is that they were expert sailors, and they brought a lot of new technology, especially war technology, to the lands which were then inhabited by the Celts. And as I said, I'd like to know more about this because I think they had a tremendous impact on the language. Also, I think it's a very interesting culture. And finally, I must admit, just a few weeks ago, I watched some film about 6 kings or 7 kings must die, and it was all about the Vikings, the Saxons, the Angles, and the Danes, all these rival kingdoms and tribes and groups who were fighting to dominate Britain at that time. So that's my talk, and I hope you liked it. Now, that was 2 minutes. In all honesty, it felt like it was a lot longer. Maybe it felt a lot longer to you, but there's some useful phrases in there, as far as I know. Okay? Also, I developed my answers. This is because, why am I interested in it? I'm interested in it from a language point of view. And then I realized I still had more time to talk at the end, and I felt like I was going to repeat myself because it said, and why would you like to know more? So I added that little bit, a little bit more information about the documentary or the film that I watched, 7 Kings Must Die or whatever. I didn't really feel it necessary to go into the details of that film. I just had one eye on the cue card and the other eye on the clock. Now, just one other thing here. I gave an example, just to give like a real world example, just to help me put in the details. Burn is a common word for a kid in Newcastle and in Scotland, and as I said, it's also the standard word, as far as I know. It's the standard word for a child in Norway as well. So there we go. We stated what we wanted. We stated what we're going to talk about, why we're interested in it, because we developed it. We gave an example. I told them what I knew, as much as I knew about this topic, well, surface level, and then I expanded it with, I recovered the linguistic side, and then I mentioned as well the documentary. Next one. Just one last thing. There was a lot of topic-specific vocabulary in that previous talk. The linguistic, the example, the Angles, the Danes, the Saxons, the Vikings, the expert sailors, all of this just added a richer context to the answer. Let's go. Describe a restaurant you like. You should say where it is, how often you go there, what food it has, and explain why you like it. Hopefully, if you get a question like this, hopefully in your mind pops up that restaurant, the one you're going to talk about. This is exactly what happened to me. So I'd like to tell you about my favorite restaurant that is it's in Valencia, in Spain. It's not in the city center. It's out in the suburbs between the city center and the beach. And it's kind of hidden, and it's not very well promoted either. So it's like one of these restaurants that just survives off word of mouth. Now, I don't go there anymore, but I used to go at least once a week with my group of Spanish friends. And it was part of a routine. We would start the night there and then go up the street to some other bars and clubs. And it was almost like a ritual. Now, the food was just simply amazing. It was all sourced by their local contacts. And I think, if I remember correctly, this family were from Teruel. And Teruel has quite a good reputation for food. And they brought all their food in from that village, from that town, and brought it into the city of Valencia and then sold it in their restaurant. And it just had a higher level of quality There were dishes, they offered dishes there that not even some of my Valencian friends had heard of, you know, and it was just a terribly unique experience. And finally, apart from the food, one of the main reasons I liked it so much was because the staff there, this sounds bizarre, but the staff were rude, but in a friendly, humorous way. Like, they didn't like people messing around when they were ordering. It was just a no-nonsense place. They were rude, but they were good-natured about it. And it was a very unique experience because in the UK, everybody's just ridiculously polite and it gets tiresome. And so to go to this place where they are just so abrupt with you, it was, for me, it was just a very unique, amusing experience. So there we go. A little anecdote at the end, a comparison with the UK, again using these expressions as far as I know, if I can remember correctly. Again, some specifics in there about the villagers. You know, they brought in the food from Teruel. I didn't want to list the dishes, because at the end of the day, this is an English exam, and listing 5 or 6 different dishes in Spanish probably isn't the smartest thing to do. But it was a real life example, and we used to do this. I used to do this with my Spanish friends, and I think that just helped because I wasn't short on material. I've had students in the past who just lied all the way through, and I don't like that strategy. I know sometimes you might be in difficult circumstances, but if you lie, you have to do 2 tasks. 1, you have to be aware of the language, and 2, you have to invent it. Whereas if you're telling the truth, you're just recalling the story. You're recalling the actual situation. Okay, final one. Describe an antique or some other old object that your family has kept for a long time. You should say what it is, how your family first got this thing, how long your family has kept it, and explain why this thing is important to your family. Wonderful. I'd like to tell you about a wooden stool that's in our family. This stool, or this piece of furniture, is just a small one for sitting on, or for putting your legs on if you're on the couch. And it's made out of wood, and it's got the initials JC in one of the legs of the actual stool. Now, we first got this from a gentleman, a carpenter, who my dad knew. The carpenter was called Jack Crossland, and he once in a while he would give these carpentry gifts to my father. And I remember it just appeared one day in the living room when I was young, and I was really impressed by it. And then as I grew older, it just became part of the furniture. And, you know, it just goes unnoticed after a while. But last year, I returned back home. I go home every couple of months. And I saw the stool, and I saw the initials JC, and I was like, oh, wow, this is the one that was given to Dad. Like, it must be 30 years ago now. And I guess it's important for our family because I don't know if this is true, but I have a feeling that these wooden objects were in exchange for some other favors or some other work that my dad was doing for this gentleman, for this carpenter. I think it might have been just delivering food or just selling out-of-date food at a discount to this gentleman. I don't entirely know the story, but because it's been around so long and because it's incredibly unique, I think all the family members kind of have a nostalgia attached to this item, and it is a well-crafted item, also because it's stood the test of time. So there we go. Again, another unique story with some topic-specific vocabulary, some small anecdotes in there. And again, using the framework, this is because, if I remember correctly, and all of this kind of knowledge is included in the Speaking Confidence course. We go a little bit more explicit and we say, okay, when you want to use a contrast, you need to compare it with this, compare it with that. We also look at, turning the subject around, especially useful for part 3 when you want to look at it from different perspectives. It's just quite a practical course if you're in a hurry to pass the exam fast. Final cue card. Describe an interesting old person you met. You should say who this person is, when, where you met this person, what you did, and explain why you think this old person is interesting. I'd like to tell you about a polyglot I once met when I lived in Poland. This polyglot invented this method whereby you just write out vocabulary every single day. You just write a list. I can't remember the specifics, but you just write out a list, and as by magic, you're supposed to just be able to memorize the words. They become part of your vernacular, they become part of your vocabulary the longer you do this. And I met this person because I reached out to him online. I heard about his method through another polyglot, and I reached out to him, especially when I found out he was living in Warsaw, and we met. He's English, so naturally we met in a curry house, in a curry restaurant in Warsaw. We had lunch together, and the guy was incredibly friendly. He was incredibly knowledgeable, and I thought this person was interesting because he really broke down his technique. He broke down why it worked. He broke down why it's effective, why it's easy, and what to do. And it was just that I think, if I remember correctly, the person worked as an accountant during the day, but his hobby was language learning, language tuition, and I found this interesting because he didn't want to make a business out of his hobby, which is kind of different from myself. So I guess that's what I found intriguing about this person. Not to mention, as I just said before, all his knowledge of different languages, all the languages that he learned. And just one final thing, I found his personal situation interesting as well. I can't remember correctly, but he opened up rather, not enthusiastically, but he opened a lot regarding some personal details, which I thought was quite surprising. Personally, I would never do that, but that's one of the reasons why I think I found this person interesting and why he stuck in my mind. And that's my presentation about an elderly person I met and who I found interesting. So again, I'm working through the bullet points. What we did, we ate curry in a restaurant. I couldn't really expand on that, I couldn't really say, he put the samosa up to his mouth, he ate it, he said that there are better samosas in Bradford in England. I couldn't say, I wasn't going to expand on that. It's not really that interesting. But the fact that he shared his personal life, the fact that he's got this a career in accounting, but his hobby is linguistics, I found that quite interesting. And again, I'm using the phrases and I'm developing my answer and I'm giving examples and I'm giving specifics. All of this you want to start incorporating, if you haven't already. You want to start incorporating it into your speaking practice. Now, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. If you've got your exam coming up soon, or even just in a month or two, you probably want to sign up to our newsletter, Pass the IELTS Exam Fast. It's been overhauled recently. You get about 10 emails, all with valuable information on how to overcome some of the most common obstacles facing IELTS students, and most importantly, how to prepare effectively so you pass quickly. And it's all based around using tools and frameworks rather than general information. So that's it from me today. Have a super day. Keep your head up high. Keep moving forward. You will pass the exam. Don't get bogged down by it. Don't get so frustrated. Remember to keep your eye on the big picture, which is probably to go abroad, to start studying in the UK, the US, in Canada, in Australia, New Zealand, in Ireland, in Scotland, wherever. Keep moving forward. You will get there. And we are here to help. Good luck. Have a super day.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.